In this short video tutorial, we will be doing an overview of the facility built into ModelRisk for fitting functions to data. Almost everything you see here is a unique feature to ModelRisk. Makes ModelRisk very fast to use, both for building models and for running simulations, and also makes it very user-friendly. The purpose of our overview here is to really give a context and an overview for fitting to historical data, because there's a number of components that are really common across all of these different functions, and hopefully this will help put everything, make everything clearer as you look at the details for some of these different items. The other thing I'll mention is that there also are a number of individual videos going into more detail about each of these different types of fitting and each of these different features and functions within ModelRisk. And I would also refer you to the help file within ModelRisk as well for more detail. So let's begin. Where we'll start with the simplest and the most basic, and that is parametric fitting. We can use parametric fitting to fit historical data both to probability distributions, to time series, and also to copulas. Distributions are obvious. Time series are a set of data that happen over the course of a period of time that are all related, and then copulas are used for correlations. When we talk about fitting or doing parametric fitting, what we're talking about here is starting with a parametric function, for instance, a beta distribution, and trying to find the parameters that most closely make the beta distribution fit the data that we started out with. Same for time series and also for copulas. We're talking about parametric defined functions. But also within ModelRisk is a very nice feature, a particularly unique feature, and that is the ability to do non-parametric fitting. And there are a couple areas where we can do that, and that is in distributions. We have something called an ogive distribution or an empirical distribution, and then we also have something called an empirical copula. In this case, what we're doing is we're allowing the distribution and the copula to actually take the shape and the form of the actual data. Rather than trying to find parameters that make a parametric distribution or copula or time series most closely fit the data, we're using the actual data itself to build an empirical data-driven distribution or copula that we can then use in our risk analysis models. A quick note on correlation. You'll hear the word used a lot, and certainly it's very important within ModelRisk. We have two main ways to correlate in ModelRisk. When we're talking about distributions or multiple probability distributions, we use copulas to create both linear and nonlinear correlation structures. And for either two or up to many distributions. When we're talking about time series distributions, we're able to fit correlation structures in the form of multivariate time series. And there are several available which actually look at the historical values in the time series we're trying to simulate and allow us to then generate into the future all of those time series in a correlated fashion. When we're fitting, all of the topics we're talking about here, distributions, copulas, and time series, are all fitted using the same common method, which is the maximum likelihood method. All three are also compared against each other via the information criteria. So rather than using some of the more standard goodness of fit statistics, such as Anderson-Darling, we're using a technique called information criteria, which not only takes into account how closely a parametric distribution fits some data, but also penalizes a particular distribution as it has more parameters. So we want to find the best fit with the least number of parameters using information criteria. Very important feature, completely unique to ModelRisk, is the idea of uncertainty. This applies for copulas, time series, and distributions. When we do an MLE, or maximum likelihood estimate fit, we're finding the parameters that most closely create a parametric distribution to fit the data. However, the question is, how certain are we really that the samples of data are representative of the underlying true population? And so we have the ability in ModelRisk to say we don't know how closely the sample data is really going to match the population. And so there's a parameter we can use when fitting called the uncertainty parameter. In this case, we've got some data represented by the histogram. The red line is a fitted distribution, a fitted parametric distribution. It's the MLE. But if we select the uncertainty parameter, what we can do is acknowledge the fact that there is uncertainty about the particular parameters that are driving this fitted distribution. And so we can now come up with a number of other distributions which also fit. And what happens in a simulation when you are using the uncertainty parameter is for every trial of the simulation, it uses a slightly different set of parameters so that you can allow for all of the uncertainty you also have about the parameters driving the distribution. As far as outputs for distributions, time series, and copulas, in all cases there's some common types of outputs we can use in ModelRisk. There's a sampled value, so we can actually generate, every time we recalculate the spreadsheet, we can generate a value out of a distribution or time series or copula. In this case, I'm showing an example where we'd fitted a gamma distribution to some data, and one particular sample is shown here, and every time we would recalculate the spreadsheet, we'd get a different answer. It may be also of interest to actually look at the parameters. So for this fitted gamma distribution, the gamma distribution uses two parameters, the alpha and the beta. And we've here outputted and populated cells in our spreadsheet for the alpha and the beta parameters used in the fitted distribution. If we were using uncertainty, actually these parameters would change slightly for every trial of the simulation. And then we can also output objects. Objects are a very useful, powerful feature within ModelRisk. They're a little complex, and I would encourage you to study them more either by tutorial videos or the ModelRisk help file. So again, I'd recommend that you find out more about all of the fitting functions and features within ModelRisk. There are a number of other videos that go into the specifics of fitting copulas, time series, distributions, both the empirical copula and the empirical distribution, topics of uncertainty, and so on. I'd encourage you to explore those in depth because they will help you make better, more robust risk analysis models. I'd also mention that all of the topics here and in all of the videos can also be viewed and read about in the ModelRisk help file, which is available online at www.vosesoftware.com. It's also available in the trial version of ModelRisk. You can download a free, fully functional 30-day trial of ModelRisk at the Vose Software website. And then please feel free to contact us at these numbers anytime at Vose Software or at our sister company, who's also our main reseller, and that's Vose Consulting. If you have sales questions, technical questions, we'd love to hear from you. And you can reach Vose Consulting at these numbers or via www.voseconsulting.com.